your student information system and always know that, it's correct. And we do that in PowerSchool via what we call API plugins. Uh, when your databases are built, there is an API plugin that is installed in your PowerSchool SIS environment that connects it to your instance or your database for special programs. And just to kind of, so you can build your vocabulary of all things PowerSchool, we call that the PowerSchool's REST API. And when that REST API is installed in your PowerSchool SIS environment, as I said, it allows us to connect to the data in PowerSchool, and it also allows us to install what are called model import and export layouts. And in those model import and export layouts, it is a series of field imports that allow us to tap into PowerSchool and bring over data and populate the data that's in special programs. So what that really looks like for an end user is similar to this on my screen. There's something called a general student education profile. And when a student is enrolled in PowerSchool SIS, that general ed profile, that integration layout, brings over some information about that student. It is not all of the demographic data that it brings over for the student, but it is the key demographic data which would allow you to recognize that student, know what grade that student is in, know what school that student is attending. And it creates a general ed profile. So your general ed profiles over in special education contain a profile for your general population of students, all of your active students that are over in PowerSchool SIS. Somebody enrolls, the integration will pick up that record and build a profile over in special programs. If a student is identified to be receiving services of some sort within special programs, then a process is completed by a user, which allows the user to search for and select the student from the general table and import the student into the student table. And that process of importing the student into the student table kicks off what is called a student import. And that student import checks over in PowerSchool and it brings over additional demographic data. So now, instead of just having the general ed profile that doesn't have all the information, it now will come over and build the student profile, which includes things like ethnicity, the grade, the building, the enrollment entry date, and some other key elements. It also will bring over the student contact records. So that's the guardian information. As part of the overall integration, we also bring over staff profiles. A staff profile is built for every staff in SIS that is assigned to an active location on the teacher affiliation tab. Okay. So if someone is, you have a new teacher over in PowerSchool and your PowerSchool SIS admin goes in, assigns security, assigns them to be able to get into PowerSchool Teacher or even PowerSchool SIS, they set them up with an active location over on the teacher affiliation tab. Our integration for staff says, oh, got a record, I'm going to bring it over. It also brings over all of your active classes. So those are all of your master schedule sections that are active for the current school year. And since we have students and staff and classes, we also can provide our users over in special programs student rosters, because we have enough data to put that together so that for our teachers, in particular for our teachers that are using special programs, they have access to all the kiddos in their class, and they actually can go to their classes and see their class rosters, and that's how they can pick students that are in their classes. So those are, the integration layouts that are bringing the data over from PowerSchool SIS. And of course, within special programs, as your users are using special programs, they are creating additional data. They are creating documents, and those documents are populating the profiles, and they are aggregating all of those key data elements you need to manage programs and that you need for state reporting. So as we collect the state reporting data and the alerts have to do with, am I 504, am I IEP, am I gifted? As those students are identified, found eligible, and become members of the programs, the alerts are turned on over in special programs. But it's important that this state reporting data and these alerts go back to your source of authority because it's, as I said, the main keeper of all your data. And so from that perspective, we have something that are called exports. So your import layouts are bringing in all of this data, and your exports are pushing state reporting and alerts back over to PowerSchool SIS. And that is called continuous integration. And as I said, your continuous integration is accommodated by what are called model import layouts. And your model import layouts consist of layouts in all of the areas that we just looked at: general ed students, your regular ed students, staff, classes, class staff, class student. It keeps your locations in sync. It always is keeping your districts up and running. By that, I mean, there is a district profile that contains a record for all of the Alabama districts, for example, and that's accommodated by an import layout that's moving back and forth as well. And then we have, depending on the state that you live in, there will always be some state-related kind of imports. Now, how these work is that when the PowerSchool SIS REST API is installed, it installs layouts. And in this particular screenshot, you can see that I'm looking in staff and student change notifications. And if you're actually looking, if you've logged in using your admin account and you're looking in your database, you would be able to see these model import layouts under administration, configuration, integration. There's an integration tab. And you will only be able to see it with that admin account. And it is there that the import layouts are installed. And it is in that environment or on that tab that integration can be monitored and reviewed and verified. So if you're looking there, it will look similar to this down here. You'll see a lot of them here. And we'll do a little demo of that once we get through the bulk of some of this. So when those layouts are installed, in each of these areas, whether it's general ed, whether it's students, whether it's staff, there are two import layouts that make up the data imports. One is just the regular import, student import model, and the second one is the change notification. The student import runs once a day, every day. It's scheduled to run on your server. Now remember, you're all hosted with PowerSchool. So in the hosted environment on the Alabama server, there are integration layouts that are constantly running. And the regular import layouts are scheduled to run once a day in off-peak hours. And they're scheduled on an algorithm, so it's not as if I can tell you that Birmingham runs at 2 and Monroe County runs at 4. It is just a constant algorithmic process that's running on the server. As it finds some space, it connects to your server and it runs that import layout. And when that import layout runs once a day, it completely refreshes the student data based on what you have in SIS. The change notifications run all day long. And as part of that running all day long, they're constantly polling PowerSchool SIS. They kind of go from location to location, hitting each of your buildings, and they're looking for changes in data. So if a user changes a phone number, then the next time that continuous integration pulls that location, it says, oh, there's a phone number that's been changed. And it picks it up and it refreshes the profile in special programs. So really important concept here. Imports once a night, but they completely refresh everything. Change notifications continuously throughout the day. Are they instantaneous? They're not instantaneous, but because of the polling process, they should be, pretty quick. It could be 30 seconds, it could be 60 seconds. It just really depends on the size of your district and what's happening in server traffic, I would say. But it is within a very short period of time, usually under a minute or so, that those are changing as it's going through and polling. All right, so what does that look like? Let's go out and give you. So I'm going to go to my Alabama hosting site. So remember, if you all have the credentials, you're all on the same database. Well, you're not on the same database. You were on the same server and you all have different databases. And if you've gotten your credentials, that would have included a school district ID, which would be unique to you, and an account with a temporary password. And pursuant to the instructions that were sent to you, you would have changed your password. And you're guarding it with your life now. All right, so here I am over in special programs. So let's review what I just said in the context of being able to see it. Under search, I see all of my data areas that store data. How does the data get there? Well, it gets there through integration, right? We know that now. In the general ed area, there is a general ed profile. We'll take a look at Miss Kristen. And the general education student profile, as I said, consists of some key data elements integrated over from PowerSchool SIS. Every time a student is enrolled, it builds this profile. If this student, for example, is identified as receiving services over in special education, then they are identified and imported into the student table. And the administrators at your site, pursuant to their security privileges, have access to do that. Remember, we're going to talk about security in our next session, but there is a specific privilege that allows you to import students into the student table. And so now this student who I've imported now has a record over in the student table. And once they're in the student table, in addition to just having a general ed profile, they have all these profiles, right? We talked about that if you were in any of my other sessions. The student demographic profile, which is the one that I'm looking at, is populated because the student import layout kicked in and integrated the data over from SIS. All of the address information, the home phone information, the ethnic information, the grade, the enrollment start date, the school ID, the school that they're in. And there's also some additional information about whether or not the student is a in-state or out-of-state transfer. And that gets populated via the student import. Every night, all of this information gets completely refreshed from SIS. If during the day a phone number is changed in SIS, then this demographic data gets refreshed pursuant to the change notification, which I said is, fairly instantaneous. In all of your databases, however, under the More button, there's a menu item that says Refresh Profile. I don't have it, I'm not integrated. It says Refresh Profile. And if a user clicks that, then it automatically goes and looks at SIS and refreshes the data. So we have the import that runs once a day, we have the change notification that's constantly polling, and then we have an instantaneous manual refresh if you need to. Okay. All of that is accommodated via the profiles, or via the integration. So how would I see that on the back end? That's what it looks like for a user. And of course, the same thing applies to all of this. I'm just using students as an example. So logging in as the administrator, I can go to configuration, and over here, I'm going to see where my integration has been installed. You will see over here under the data source, that's your API that's unique to PowerSchool. And here are all the import layouts. And as I said, for each import layout, there's two of them. One that's just the import and one that's the change notification. You will all see a column that says the last date the data was changed. And in your live environments, that would be last night. So they're constantly running. You'll see the date that they're running at 9. If it's a change notification, you may not see that they're running, because remember, change notifications only kick in if a piece of data is changed. So the frequency by which they're running, it really determines on if people are overdoing any data maintenance over in PowerSchool SIS. And since some of you are, you're not live in SIS yet, it would be less frequently. You can see the profile type, meaning this particular import layout is populating that profile. I can also, and I'm going to go down to the student imports. I'm going to do this a little differently. I'm going to come up here, show all profile types. And I'm just going to do a deeper dive into students, just because it's less stuff to look at. All right, so now I can see that here's the import, there's the change notification. There's the magnifying glass. When I click on the magnifying glass, it takes me to the actual layout. Now, during deployment, we manage all of this. We install these, we're checking on them, so forth and so on. You, as a customer, can't change anything. We're going to talk about kind of that process here in a second. So you can see as I'm looking at the import layout, it's under configuration management. It has all of the different queries that are set up as part of that integration, so forth and so on. And then down on the bottom, you will see the target field that the data is going to in special programs and where it's pulling from over in PowerSchool. And it's called a model import because it is exactly the same for everyone in Alabama. It is just like your Alabama model. Your integration layouts are designed and customized specifically for your environment in Alabama. And as part of that, and I'm looking at grade right here, you will notice that there are even specific translations which have already been created specific to Alabama. You have in Alabama G-1, G-2, and G-3 for your different levels of pre-K. Other states don't have that. So we've created translations to match our keyword values over in special programs. And that is part of the setup, which is done specifically for Alabama in the integration. So here's race. We know what your race codes are. We know how to configure them. And because you all are on a state model, and especially in the case of Alabama, where you all are exactly the same, then this is all locked down and streamlined so that we can do a perfect match over to PowerSchool SIS and eliminate 99.9% of any kinds of errors as the integration data is coming over. All right, so that's what it looks like in the database. Let's go back and talk about another area really quick. When I looked at, if you remember, go back to this picture, I said there were also exports. So we have exports for alerts and for state reporting. And those exports are set up over in integration on a tab that's called the export tab. And those exports consist of a PowerSchool alert export, which we talked about. And those are all of the different alerts. Now remember, there's 5 alerts: IEP, 504, GT, EL, and RTI. And those are automatically turned on or turned off depending on a student's eligibility and participation in a program. They're not user enabled. They're enabled by virtue of the documents and the data within special programs. And so those exports are also scheduled to run off peak hours at night, so that if a student gets identified as a 504, it's going to turn that flag on, and that alert goes over to PowerSchool that night. And the next day, your teachers, when they're looking at their class rosters or they're looking in PowerSchool Teacher, are going to see a 504 alert, and they're going to say, oh, this kid's got an accommodation plan. And they'd be able to click that alert, and that alert, because of the integration of the two systems, would open up that 504 accommodation plan and allow them to view it. Okay. In addition to the alerts that are going back, there are state reporting exports. And there's a bunch of them. I happen to just show you one of them. But there's about 6 or 7 exports that are populating and sending state reporting data back to PowerSchool SIS. And if you are looking in your database under integration export, you will see that they're actually turned on. All imports and exports are currently running in all Alabama databases, and they have been for a year, because we're constantly reviewing them, verifying them to make sure that they have been running consistently and without error in preparation for, handing it over to you at the beginning of the school year. There is one exception to that rule, and that is that we did not turn on your class imports, and that is because you're working on master schedules. So the class imports, which populate your classes and your rosters, they don't get enabled until after migration and your year-end rollover process in preparation for you to go live. And then we'll start to bring those over. All right. So I said that all of those integrations have been running for a long time and are still running. And that is called continuous integration. That's what it's called within the software itself. There is a setup, a configuration that turns on continuous integration. And as part of that continuous integration, there is an area within continuous integration that allows you to receive notifications if anything goes awry. And we're going to talk about what could go awry. But in particular, there is an area where an email address is entered, and the users who has that email address is sent a notification if there has been an import with a row issue or a failed import. And right now, we get those emails. They go to the Special Programs Integration Team. And that's how they can keep track of 160 databases, because they get all of those notifications. Well, when you go into production, we remove our email address and we will request an email address from each district, and that is going to be the individual at your district who is responsible for monitoring continuous integration. What does that include? It includes just reviewing notifications if you get an issue, to review it, to see what's going on with it, to review the import logs, to see what the error was for, and if there are errors, to fix them. And the key takeaway from this, and which goes back to this environment here, errors that are in integration always start here. They start in SIS because we're just bringing information over from SIS. So if there is a hiccup in integration, it's because of some data over in PowerSchool SIS. So that's why if you looked at any of my handouts or any of the information where I said you need your PowerSchool SIS admin person to come to this training or to listen to this recording, it's because if there are errors in integration, where do they need to be fixed? In SIS, not in special programs. Special programs is just telling you what caused the error. So take that, if you're with me and you're not the PowerSchool SIS admin, you want to make sure and share that information with them. If they don't want to come to one of these sessions, then you can kind of take the message back. There'll also be some recordings and of course all the handouts, because they need to kind of be aware of some of this information that we're sharing today. All right, so what is going to happen to that person who gets assigned? As I said, they get a notification, and then of course they need to go in and review the logs to see what the heck was going on. Correct the data errors in SIS. And last but not least, is that if there are some kind of catastrophic failure, of course, we want you to know about it and to enter a support ticket post-production, not now, post-production. All right. In the continuous integration monitoring area, as I said, this is where imports and exports are enabled. This is telling me just because those are turned on that your continuous integration is running. Also, post-production, you as an admin do have the authority to go turn off any of those flags. And if you do, you'll stop integration. And sometimes you might want to do that. You might want to stop integration when you're doing your year-end rollover over in PowerSchool SIS. There are situations once you go live where, you might want to do that. But that's where that is enabled. Over here on this same continuous integration monitoring page is where your email address would get entered for failed imports and reports with row issues. All right. So what are imports with row issues? What are the kinds of things you could expect to see? Within the world of integration, there's three distinct kinds of log issues that you'd see. The first one is called a success with a row issue. And success with a row issue is where the record is imported, is sent over, integrates over into special programs, and one field of data has a problem with it. So for example, a record comes over and there is in the address of the student, the user did not enter the state where the student lives. That field is just empty. So maybe they have their address, and maybe they live in Birmingham, but when they got down to what state they live in, they just forgot to enter that information in. And in that particular case, it brings the record over and it throws out an error in the log that says, oh, not set. And we'll show you that, state not set. There are other kinds of issues that may occur if there are formatting issues. So for example, someone enters a phone number and they have too many digits in the phone number and it throws an error. It says formatting issues, or a birth date is formatted incorrectly. So it's looking at the data over there and it's got a formatting issue. It's blank. It is trying to match up a keyword or a code that you have in SIS with the code that we have over in special programs, and they don't match. Now, translations and keyword values are used, as I said, to take a code that you have in SIS, crosswalk it to what we have over in special programs, and populate a field. Languages, countries, states, grades, enrollment reasons, enrollment exit reasons. Those are all examples of fields that have drop downs that are coming from PowerSchool SIS that go through the translation and the keyword mapping via integration. It's highly unlikely that you will have very many of those errors. And that is because the keywords are locked down in both SIS and special programs to support not being able to change them so you don't have errors. And your keyword values and your codes have gone through a vetting with Alabama State Department of Education, and you all have the same code. So highly unlikely. There could be down the road, after you guys have been using PowerSchool SIS for several years, that, you know, maybe you might have some translation kinds of issues, but that'd be far into the future. Today, as we have been running continuous integration and reviewing your logs for the past year and a half, that is exactly why, because we have picked up all those various translations and we know how to map them, and we've done all of that refining work. All right, so that's a row issue. It means the record came over, but just one particular piece of that data is incorrect in SIS. As soon as it gets corrected in SIS, what happens? It fixes it. You don't have to do a thing other than say, go add your state. And then that night, when the import layout kicks off, it will fix it, or the change notification will grab it. The second kind of integration issue that is more troublesome is a row rejection. A row rejection is when the entire record is blocked. And that's the type of error that we're going to spend a little time on, because it goes to integrate the record over into special programs and it rejects the entire record. And it will reject the entire record because something about the record doesn't match the record it's trying to update. Okay, so think duplicate student IDs. Keep that in mind. We're going to talk about that in a second. The third one is a failure. And right now, as we are going through implementation and deployment, and your folks are working on their implementations, there are failures quite frequently because they're taking their servers up and down. So anytime that integration goes out to check with your PowerSchool SIS server and it can't find it because they brought it down, for example, or the other day, maybe because there was bad weather, we had about 30 or 40 minutes where all the servers kind of went down and then they had to reboot them and pop them back up. Well, that's going to cause a failure. And there's nothing that you have to do to remedy that if it's just a server access failure, because the minute it can find the server again, they'll just continue to run. All right. So how do I see these errors? So here's the first thing. If you would get a notification, that's why we want you to get those email notifications. Those notifications are always just going to tell you that there were some row issues. Okay, they don't tell you what's in it. The notification does not give you significant amount of data other than to say you have issues. And I wish they said more, but they don't. The best way to review integration is simply to go in and log in as an admin and to look at your integration page. And on your integration page, if there are row issues next to the actual import layout here, it's going to be highlighted in yellow. I didn't highlight that. It is in yellow. It says success with row issues. And you go, oh, and you open up the import. And when you open up the import, there will be a yellow link that's a hyperlink. And when you click on it, it takes you to the import log. And within the import log, it's going to show you the error. So you can see continuous integration last completed, shows you the building, and it shows you any errors that you might have. And in this case, I have 2 kiddos, and it's telling me that there's a problem with the birth date. Now, shows you the student's ID, which I've blocked out. And all I would need to do is to fix this error over in PowerSchool SIS, and of course the integration would just bring it right back over. When you are looking at integration logs, you only will get a yellow error if it happened on the last building. So if you have 20 buildings and it processes them in random. Remember, these are all server polling. So it'll grab a building and it will just do them in random. It's only showing you the last one that it processed. So in order to be able to see all of your import logs, you have to click on the import logs. There's a little button that says filter out rows that don't have anything wrong with them. And then you can see all of the row issues from any of the buildings. Okay, so you'd be able to go through them and see them. So can't see them all from this home page. You have to go into the import logs and look at them. And that looks like this. Let's get us to a place where you can kind of see what this looks like. So administration, configuration, integration. That's what it would look like. They're all running. They're running with success. This one says there was a row issue. If I click on it, see that's a hyperlink. I can click on it and see the import logs. I can go to this import model and it says success, but if I click on it, I can still go to these logs. I can click on import logs. And now I can see that even though I didn't see this, I can see that I've got some integration that's going on with the district office. And to look at that, I would click to view the details. And I'm not going to click on it because I don't really know what data is out there, and and I'm recording, but I would click to see the details and I would be able to see it. All right, so row issues. What do you do with a row issue? You fix the data in SIS. Here is some examples of what you'd see. We talked about some of these. Not set. Problem with province. Well, this was Canada, so problem with state. Not set. It's not a keyword. Somebody entered something in there, it was bad data. Problem with an email address. Here's the kiddo's name. It's got a bad formatting on the email. Problem with a birth date. Same kind of thing. Bad data. Fix it in SIS. Now, a row rejection, slightly more serious. A row rejection occurs because something about that record caused a rejection when it tried to verify it against the data that's in special programs. When a record is created in special programs, so let's go back to square one. A student is enrolled in PowerSchool SIS, and the first thing that happens is it creates a record in special programs. It sends a record over to special programs and it builds the general ed profile. And the first time it does that, it creates something called an integration IDT, which is assigned to that student. It is an internal ID that says, oh, Jesse James over here in SIS, you're linked to Jesse James over here in special programs. When I build the record in special programs, you're going to have the same ID and the same name. And just to make sure you're always the same person, I'm going to create a whole new identifier, which is this integration identifier, and link it to you. And we call those integration IDTs. Very important concept. Every data record, every piece of data that's in special programs that comes from PowerSchool SIS has an associated integration IDT, a class roster, a student, a staff, a building, everything that originates in SIS that comes over to special programs, when it is built in our database, is assigned an integration IDT. And that's how we know that we're always populating the correct record. So if a record is coming over via integration and the integration IDT matches, but something else about the record no longer matches, it rejects it. It says, I don't know who you are. The row is rejected because the other match value would not be unique. And if you click that, happens to be a hyperlink, it opens up this little box and it shows you. And at first, if you're looking at them, you have to be aware of what you're looking at. Because like here, I'm like, oh, I see what's wrong. This is the SIS ID. And look at the special programs ID. Somehow these are different now. Why are they different? I don't know. Somebody changed something along the way, right? Now, normally, would you ever change an ID in SIS once it's been assigned? Probably not. Does it ever happen? I've seen it happen. I've seen folks that let the SIS assign a number, and then they go in and change the number the next day for some particular reason that, And what happens is that none of their stuff was working because every time they would do that, it would reject the row. So don't change ID numbers. If you change ID numbers, you're going to get a row rejection. The other thing that causes a row rejection is if the name doesn't match. And this is way more common. So Jesse James is enrolled, and then it builds his record over in PowerSchool SIS, and their IDs match. Everything matches. Except now, when it goes to import the record, the registrar in SIS was asked to change Jesse's name to Jesse James-Smith. And they do that. Now what happens? This is Jesse James, and this is Jesse James.Smith. They don't match anymore. So row rejections are caused when the key data elements that it's trying to match against don't match anymore. First name, last name. If you're a student or staff, it needs to match the first name, last name. The SIS ID and the staff ID no longer match. That would either be the student ID, or in the case of staff, you have a staff ID in SIS and it has staff ID that was created in special programs and somebody changed one of them. or the integration IDTs don't match. In most cases, that would be a very unusual situation, because you actually can't change an integration IDT. That's something that would be considered more of an import or a migration issue. So very unlikely that you would see that. But these situations here happen all the time, all the time. So how do you fix it? I mean, that's really the key question, is how do you fix it? So the first thing you want to do is you want to be aware of what causes it and tell people. Don't change IDs. Number two, don't change names. And if you do change a name, you need to manually change it in both places. If you're going to change Jesse's last name in SIS, you need to change it in special programs too. So the next time that it integrates, you can, they'll match again, okay? So that's the important thing, that they'll match again. So that's a row rejection. A failure. What happens if you have a failure? Now, move that up a little. Can't see it. During PowerSchool SIS implementation, there may be instances where the servers are down and the integration will resume when maintenance activities are complete. And that's one of the reasons that I haven't really pushed any of our districts to assign their person to continuous integration quite yet. I think that until the SISs are going live, I really don't need anybody to monitor integration, because they're popping up and down as they're doing work out there. So not anything that I would be too concerned about. The other thing about a failure is that if you see a failure and let's say that there was a failure to connect, so failed to connect to the SIS server, I mean, check on it the next day. If it's back up and running, that's just a SIS server. The kinds of failures I think that you want to be really aware of is where there's a failure and it never restarts. And that's the kind of situation where, you know, you want to enter a special ed ticket and have them take a look at it. And of course, if you are the PowerSchool system admin person, you do have the authority to enter special education support tickets. So not that common, but something to be aware of. Couple of things that just ideas. I know that I have been told that the import logs, you know, they don't always give you a lot of information. One of the things that I have kind of thrown up as an option for districts is, especially as you go into production, you know, you can create diagnostic reports in our report writer that look for, you know, within the integration where you might be missing some data. You know, I can do, you can have your buildings run a report, you know, once a month that just says, go out there and make sure that all your phone numbers are formatted correctly and your birthdays are formatted correctly and you're not missing any required address data. So that's always something that you can do. In addition, if you are thinking that maybe your integration isn't running, remember, you can always go to a student profile and click more and do a refresh, and it will, because it will show on your screen that you just refreshed it. It'll say, oh, okay, I refreshed this data, and that will show you that your integration is running. All right, so all about integration. Now, last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about single sign-on and App Switcher, because your single sign-on is really a function of integration. I mean, if you think about it, that's actually what keeps everything in sync, is part of the integration process. And in the integration process, when your staff are integrated with special programs, part of what gets integrated is something called an OpenID. And that is their credentials that allows them to use single sign-on to go between applications. So it's that kind of like an integration IDT. It's an open ID. It allows them to have one set of credentials that they can use to switch between different applications. And it used to be that most people used single sign-on only through PowerSchool SIS through our protocol for open IDs that just allowed you to, and you may have seen this before, if you are logged into special to SIS on your application menu, there's a link that says Special Programs Home. And typically that is how users always accessed PowerSchool special programs. Now, we now have another application that's called App Switcher. And App Switcher is a kind of a standalone portal. It's also installed in all of your environments. And it allows you to, from any application in PowerSchool, click on the little waffle. That's a waffle. I didn't know that until someone told me that was called a waffle. And go between your applications. And that's what App Switcher looks like. And it allows a district to install this App Switcher environment regardless of the protocol that you're using, meaning that I don't have to just use PowerSchool SIS OpenID. I could use Google, I could use Microsoft Azure, and we know how to set that up so that you can have this App Switcher installed and be able to move between applications. And that is the environment that is being set up in Alabama. The other thing to be aware of is that single sign-on is not turned on right now. It is turned off. So if you have been set up in PowerSchool SIS and they've done your security the way we've talked about them doing it, and they've assigned you to a user access role in PowerSchool SIS, and you have clicked on the special program home link, and it takes you to special programs and there's no menu items, that's because it's turned off, okay? Single sign-on is not enabled to allow a user to get to any features or functions right now. The only way that you can access your applications are through the front end. It's through the URL, okay? And that is why those admin credentials are critical, because it's a way that we can control who is accessing the system, and you can control who is accessing the system. The minute we turn on single sign-on, you lose control, because it's a single sign-on environment and anybody can click on special programs and all of a sudden they'll be over in special programs. So it's disabled now. We are going to talk about in the next session, the security section, on how can you provide access to special programs if you either have an assistant that you want to allow into the system, or if you happen to be the admin assistant. How can you, if you haven't been set up to get that admin account, how can that person give you your own account that allows you to begin to navigate into the system and to begin to learn it about the administrative functions better. And we're also going to talk about how to create some core team accounts so that your critical users will be able to sign in when we do migration to be able to validate data. So all of that's to come. We'll be talking about that in the next session. Last but not least, and at the end of all of our slide decks, you're going to see one final page that says real world tasks for production go live. Within these real world tasks for production go live, there are going to be items that we are going to review that have to be completed for production go live checklist items. Okay. So in some cases, they're homework. In some cases, they are just put this on your to-do list, because when we continue to follow up with you, these are going to be the items that we talk about in our office hours. They have to be done before you can go live. So in the world of integration, you have really one very simple task, and that is to determine who is going to be identified to monitor continuous integration. We're going to want to have that contact, and it can be more than one person. It could be your PowerSchool SIS admin. It could be as well as your PowerSchool Special Programs admin. So it can be more than one person. We're going to ask you for that, and we are going to need that in order to sign you off. The other thing that we'll transition over to you for the production go live checklist is we will review during our sign-off session with you. We will take you over to integration and make sure and review that all of your logs are running smoothly, and they will turn on, and we will turn on all of your class imports, okay, so that they start integrating. We don't want to turn them on until your schedules have been committed and your year-end processing is complete in PowerSchool, because they're still working on it. So that will be kind of the last thing that we do in preparation for you to go live, and then we'll verify that those are running and clean. So those are the two things for go live. And of course, after production go live, you know, you're going to be the person monitoring it, and you'll just be checking for data over on the PowerSchool SIS side. Of course, you'll remember all the great things I told you today. All right, so that concludes my talking. We have about a half an hour left. This is the time for you to do a little exploration on your own. If you have your account and you would like to sign in and do a little navigating, do a little exploring, we are here. I am here with you for the next half hour, and also to answer any of your questions. So if you have any questions, you can stick them in the chat, raise your hand. I can even take you off mute if you want to chat with me. If you want to hang out and do some hands-on, you can. If you don't want to hang out with me for the next half hour, you can pop off. And if you're joining me for the next session, then the next session will start at 11, I think it's 11 o'clock. I'm in North Carolina, so I always get my time zones mixed up. So I think it's 11 o'clock for you. All right, I'll leave this slide up because that if you actually are logging in, that'll tell you how to get there.